Hello, everyone. I'm Lindsey Cameron, an assistant professor of management at the Wharton School, and I'm delighted to speak with you today at this remarkable conference. I only wish that I could be there in person, but please, my door is open for conversations or if you want to continue the dialogue. And here I'll be talking just a little bit about the future of work and is it here yet? You've been a little kid in the car with your parents. You've asked, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Well, are we yet at the future of work? I hope to tackle just a little bit of this big question right now. So around the future of work, there's a lot of talk about AI. Is it augmenting work or is it replacing work? And are we in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution? And you may have seen some of these conversations in the media. Amazon's created a hiring tool to help recruit a more diverse workforce. It's actually discriminating against certain groups of people. Or chatbots that do the similar sort of spouting racist propaganda. This right here is a bakery in Japan in which makes a lot of different types of treats, and they actually use AI as part of the cash register to ring out the treats, only because it's so hard for the worker to remember them all. So is this the future of work, you might be thinking? Well, I split the future of work into these 4 different components. Who does the work? Are they independent workers? Are they contractors? Do they work, remotely via the computer? When and where the work is getting done? How the work is being managed? And who helps with the work? So these are 4 different intersections that fit within the bigger umbrella of the future of work. And that's what I'll be going a little bit deeper into right now. So who does the work? When we think about traditional employment, it's a 9 to 5. You go to the office for the entire day, you have a manager, and then you come back home. This is the ideal worker, at least in the US context. But more and more, work is shifting to this non-traditional format. And this is the case in the United States. And in many ways, I think the US is catching up to the rest of the world's economy, because most of the world's economy are in what we call contingent or precarious work. So work that's short-term, part-time, often doesn't come with these employee benefits that, such as a defined pension contribution. Many companies are increasing their use of contingent workers over the next few years because it saves cost. And in North America, we've got 15 to 25% of our workforce that are doing this particular type of work. And as I mentioned before, in the global context, it's even more, up to 40% of the economy are from these individuals who are not in traditional work contracts. Now, there is a subset of individuals who see themselves more as free agents. These are these high-skilled Ruby on Rails programmers who do their work from Bali or faraway places. But more and more, we've got workers who are doing this out of necessity. This is the best job that they can possibly find, is this contingent work without any benefits. And they are really hoping to get into standard employment relationships. So why do companies prefer this type of work? Well, obviously, it helps them save money. They don't have to pay the same amount in wages, benefits, giving these workers the same type of training. Workers, though, typically that are in this independent type of work are not as committed or have as much job satisfaction within their work, in part because of this insecurity increases the stress and health problems they have. And then interestingly, some research looks at the co-workers. So who are the employees who are co-located with these independent contractors? And we find that they suffer as well. Reduced job security, they feel like they're more insecure in their jobs, they're not as attached to their organization, they have less trust with their management. And so this looks like something that on the surface level gives a lot of benefits to the employers. It ultimately may be costly because of increased turnover and lower performance. So we've talked a bit about who does the work. Now we're going to talk about when and where the work is done. So fluid work schedules. You might have heard about the 4-day work week. There are these trials where instead of working a standard 40-hour week, they're compressing or shorting work. So it's usually 4 8-hour days. This is mostly done with higher skilled knowledge workers, seeing a lot of benefits from these trials that are happening in South Africa, the UK, Australia, the United States, that workers are having more focus in their work, shortening their meetings, less accidents or safety violations. This is more in the medical context. And that individuals are taking less time off work too, because they can bunch all their leisure or doctor's appointments on these days where they're not working. So these are trials that are really for one subset of worker, more higher skilled around this 4-day work week, and seeing a lot of benefit from these fluid schedules. Now, remote work. So the teleworking has been around since the 70s, but really with the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw more individuals shifting and being able to do remote work. So these statistics are more for the US, even though they parallel to more in the global north. But we had almost everyone in the United States who could work from home was actually working from home. So about 30 to 40% of the US labor force, that was the bulk of US economic activity. So that's back to this remote work being very much linked to more higher skilled work. We found people were working longer work days, but they weren't able to maintain this still high level of productivity. People who had parents often were having to do double or triple duty in caring for their elders, caring for their kids without, strong family support. And we found individuals who didn't have children were actually putting in more hours too to sort of compensate for their coworkers that had family demands. So it's a question really about remote work. There was time saved in terms of commuting, but in terms of for the long term, for many workers, this wasn't actually a sustainable work style. And, many of our systems weren't set up for remote work. So you might be wondering, well, remote work, people can be independent, they can work at home. Do we still need managers anymore? So this is a very large study that was done around Microsoft employees. And what they found, which has been seen in other settings as well, is during the pandemic with remote work, is that your close ties, the people who were close to you got closer, and you actually became further away or more distant to your distant ties. So people that you were already close with, that relationship intensified, and then it weakened for folks further out. And middle managers had to step in to fill that role. So you can see they're spending more time on meetings, sending emails, sending IMs, because they're doing that bridging work that typically they're doing some of the bridging work that an individual worker would have done on them by themselves. So the surprising finding from the pandemic is that middle managers became even more important than ever because they were doing a lot of this social brokerage and really relying on technology. And so what the science suggests about if you're going to do this to implement more remote work is you've got to figure out what actually worked remotely, what were the interactions with technology that facilitated smooth work. I mean, Zoom, how much of us, learned to be very comfortable with Zoom? And what was it specifically that people liked about remote work? Was it different relationships with their coworkers? Was it the way the work was managed? Was it because they had less or more monitoring and contact with those middle managers? Because only when you know what worked and what didn't work can you design more successfully for the future. And then ultimately, you shouldn't let local managers decide how to implement the remote work or even giving it as a perk. It really needs to be much more of an overarching policy that's implemented across the organization. So you don't have some of your workers who are knowledge workers that get this perk while receptionists or people on the front line don't, because that can amplify fault lines already in your organization. So now how the work is being managed. So two different ways of how work is being organized, I would say, in this sort of future forward way. And one is moving beyond a traditional hierarchical structure to more flat forms of organizing. You may have heard of holacracy, which is a style of management that Zappos does, where individuals are in these governance groups and they get to vote on what the tasks they want to do. They can have meetings about the meetings where they vote on what are the new tasks that should be done or rules that should govern the meetings. And often these companies are relying heavily on technology like wiki pages, as a repository for information. We see this, a really great example of this are in DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, existing completely online. There's often not even a clear leader in some of these DAOs. And instead, you have individuals sort of buying these tokens to be able to come in to vote on different changes in the governance structure and what tasks are going to be done next. Algorithmic management is almost, I'd say, the other extreme. So flat organizations, collaborative, a decrease in hierarchy. In algorithmic management, there's a clear hierarchy. Who's in control is the algorithm. And this is where a lot of my research lies. So here, a great definition of algorithmic management: a system of control where self-learning algorithms are given the responsibility for making and executing decisions affecting labor, thereby limiting human involvement and oversight of the labor process. The main idea: algorithms here are doing the hiring, the firing, the decision-making, the evaluating that typically humans would have done. And we see this most clearly in the gig economy. So you think of your Ubers, your Junos, your Bolts, your Instacarts. These are companies in which you may never have an interaction with the actual employee of the organization. Instead, all of your interactions are with the algorithm. And if you're a social scientist or seen like myself, and you've seen some of these ads around these companies, you might be thinking, really? Do I ditch the 9 to 5 if I'm driving for Kareem? Am I really my own boss if I'm working for Bolt? And this has really led to the heart of a lot of my research, is where I look at ride-hailing drivers. And I ask the question, why do ride-hailing drivers drive? So I drove myself. This was part of my research. And I've also conducted a set of interviews with workers longitudinally. So I've been following them for 7 years, as well as secondary data from focus groups, guilds, things like this. This is my research data corpus just from the United States. I'm also in 8 other countries looking at different ride-hailing platforms. And I'll just give you a sneak peek under the hood of what these algorithms look like from the driver's perspective, because you may have only seen it as a customer. This is the work matching algorithm. So it tells you it takes maybe 12 minutes away to get the ride. It's a 3-time surge. And the timer is counting down on the bottom of how long you have to accept the ride. This is from my first day driving. It says, first day, I'm sitting on a shady street 2 blocks from my house, nervously checking my phone every 20 seconds so I don't miss a ping. My phone is on my dashboard when it suddenly starts buzzing. Yay, a ride. I see a flashing circle with the timer counting down. My hands are sweaty, the phone is vibrating, and while trying to swipe, I drop the phone under the seat. Darn. After a few seconds, the phone goes quiet and I've lost my first ride. So here you get a sense of the tension that's happening in the vehicle. It's just me and the car, and I have to make these decisions about whether or not I'm going to accept the algorithm's directions. This is another algorithm, the surge algorithm. This is a heat map of the city of Chicago. The darker the color, the higher the surge. You also get these text messages that say, demand is higher than usual in Center City. Take advantage of higher than normal fares. You see this heat map when you open the app, even before you log on. So it's very much in your face how the algorithm is trying to nudge you. And Sarah says, you turn on your app and you see that very orange bright color around downtown. That means there's a surge. There's high demand. So you rush into that area. So what, my research agenda has really been looking at is the idea of choice. Like, yes, workers have choice in choosing their platform company or when and where to drive, but that choice is not as free as one would think. Their choices are constrained at that point of when there is demand. If you need to make money, you're likely driving on the weekends or around commuting time. More specifically, this study focuses around the work cycle. So from choosing when to pick up someone, to driving to pick them up, to starting the ride, to navigating with traffic, all these embodied day-to-day interactions with the app, that is what produces choice. Because at each one of these stages with the work, you're engaging with the algorithm and ultimately consenting to the work. And then last, we're going to talk about who helps with the work. And the literature here has really focused on 2 different segments, robots and artificial intelligence. This right here is a picture of a robot that's being developed in Japan that's offering companionship. I feel like they've been using this picture for the past 5 to 6 years. It's typically not how we see robots being used. We see robots more being used in these industrial manufacturing places where they're able to do simple tasks that, replace the mechanical function that humans typically have. And just some examples from the truck industry. Some are the trucking industry, that some tasks are very easy to automate, such as long stretches on the highway. You've probably seen some of the tests, that have been done by Tesla. Other tasks are almost impossible. It's very hard to back up a truck and, attach it or latch it to a drop-off position. And then there are some places that are more in between, like last mile delivery, where we might see drones stepping in. But in general, we tend to see robots coming in when tasks are easy to automate it. Many more tasks are becoming computer mediated. For example, if you're using increased surveillance cameras and securities, which often boost monitoring on workers. So there's a mixed impact on what we're seeing in terms of how those robots, when they're not quite replacing humans, but actually increasing the surveillance that's felt on them. And this is a lot of research that we've been seeing about the role of AI. So AI is often used to help humans make better decisions and process more information that we could on our own. And just to give you a sense, it's being integrated every phase in the human resource cycle. So you think about recruiting. LinkedIn uses a really impressive algorithm that tries to increase the number of passive recruits. So people who aren't thinking about moving jobs yet, but they're trying to nudge them. So you'll have these chat bots reach out to these individuals and tell them, hey, your skill is a match for company Y, and encourage them to apply for jobs. Algorithms are also used in the selection process. Climatrix is a company that does personality testing. So they'll look at individuals who are really good in the job. So maybe they're looking at risk seeking. And an example of that for an AI test would be to have people click on a balloon and see how much they'll let the balloon inflate before they will stop clicking it. And then they'll say, okay, we've trained this AI on those who are good at the job. Now we're going to look for new candidates. We'll give them this AI test to decide who might be the best fit. And we've seen some great, some interesting, very good outcomes from plyometrics in some cases, and they're able to sort of widen the diversity of who comes into a job. There's a great example from one company about where they increased the diversity of who they hired so much they had to give people their moving allowances before they started the job as opposed to reimbursement, because the group of students had such a larger amount of economic diversity. So just a few examples of how we're seeing AI being used in the human resource cycle. But ultimately, we need to pay attention because of the opacity and scale that are inherent in algorithms and how important the outcomes are, is that they're learning on data that is as good and as unbiased as possible, and being careful that, just not always using the criterion of a population to always make individual decisions, that we continue to have a human in the loop. And Cathy O'Neill has done some great work around the weapons of mass destruction. So to sum up everything, we just took a wide tour around the world of future of work, talking about independent contractors. These are often sort of the new wave that we're seeing of individuals who are doing work. Technology is very much embedded in their job, whether or not they're these gig workers or if they're doing remote work or in flat organizations where technology is key to how the work is being done and managed. In some examples, such as the gig economy, algorithms are embedded, managing the work from day to day. And then lastly, we talked a little bit about how robots and AI are either replacing or working with humans, to usher in this new frontier of work. So thank you very much. You've been a 5-star audience. Shukran gazilan and masalama. Until the next time.